Thank you for reviewing the Americans with Disability Act training. It is everyone's job on campus to be mindful of individuals with disabilities. Some examples of things to be mindful of around campus are a garbage can blocking access to paper towels, a table placed in front of the automatic door button, snow in the disabled parking spaces, and the banning of laptops in the classroom, except for those with accommodations. We should never do anything that singles individuals out, especially anyone with a disability. The goal of this training is to improve your knowledge of the laws, regulations, and guidelines related to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and to discuss the rights and responsibilities of the college staff, faculty, and students. These laws are Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, North Carolina Senate Bill 866 passed in 2002, the ADA Amendment Act of 2008, the Higher Education Opportunities Act, and finally, the Dear Colleague Letter, written June 29, 2010. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 states that colleges may not discriminate in the recruitment, educational process, or treatment of students. Section 504 also states that students who have self-identified, provided documentation of disability, and request reasonable accommodations are entitled to receive approved accommodations, modifications of programs, appropriate academic adjustments, or auxiliary aids that enable them to participate in and benefit from all educational programs and activities. This law is the reason we have to be flexible in providing accommodations and ensure that individuals have access to everything the college provides, on and off campus, inside and outside the classroom. The Americans with Disabilities Act, passed in 1990 and then amended in 2008, provides a clearer definition of disability. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 provides civil rights protections to individuals with disabilities and also prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. Between the passing of the ADA law in 1990 and after 2008, several issues arose concerning what is actually meant. On disability and what makes a person disabled, the ADA Amendments Act of 2008 clearly defined a disability as a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits one or more life activities. Those life activities are listed as walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, working, caring for oneself, or performing manual tasks. Anyone who can provide documentation of any impairment that affects any one of these activities will be eligible for reasonable accommodation once documentation is provided. Other laws that have implications in higher education include the North Carolina Senate Bill 866 passed in 2002 and the Dear Colleague Letter written in 2010. Both of these documents address electronic information being accessible to individuals with disabilities. These two documents have been the catalyst for the new requirements centered on making digital material accessible. The Higher Education Opportunities Act, passed in 2010, allows students with intellectual disabilities to be eligible for federal financial aid. It is important to know the laws that govern ADA compliance, but even more important to know the rights and responsibilities of the college faculty, students, and staff. Under these laws, the college has certain rights and responsibilities. The college has the right to request documentation that supports accommodation requests. The college can deny a request for accommodation if documentation does not show the need. The college can also compromise and select equally effective accommodation. For example, an instructor can provide copies of their notes instead of a note-taker, or provide a note-taker instead of the instructor notes. The college has the right to refuse accommodations that impose a fundamental alteration to a program or activity. For example, the student can request additional days to complete assignments, but student forms involve students answering and responding in a timely manner. Thus, the extension of due dates may exclude student forms. The college has the responsibility to accommodate known limitations and ensure everything is accessible. The college also has the responsibility to maintain confidentiality of all ADA recipients, and most importantly, we have the responsibility to provide accommodations without compromising content, quality, or level of instruction. This is the reason it is extremely important to have open lines of communication between faculty and the ADA coordinator. Students are afforded several rights and responsibilities under the law as well. Students have the right to have equal access to everything the college offers. Students have the right to equal opportunity to learn, work, and receive accommodations. Students have a right to have their information held confidential and to receive information in accessible formats. The responsibilities of the students are to meet qualifications and maintain institutional standards in all areas of the college. Students have the responsibility to self-identify their disability to disability services, request accommodations, and provide the required documentation. Students also have the responsibility to follow all published procedures for obtaining academic adjustments. Just like the college and students, faculty have rights and responsibilities as well. Faculty rights and responsibilities are separate from the college because under ADA law, an individual can be held liable if found non-compliant with ADA laws. Faculty has the right to request a written agreement before allowing a tape recorder in class, and faculty have the right to expect and enforce the behavior conduct policy at the college. No disability trumps this policy. The faculty has the right to challenge an accommodation. The faculty cannot challenge the student. The communication must happen with the ADA coordinator and instructor. An instructor cannot make a decision to stop providing or make changes to accommodation. Instructors have a responsibility to not provide accommodations without a written accommodation form from the ADA coordinator unless willing to provide the accommodation to the entire class. Faculty have the responsibility to not single out or identify students. The instructor may have some leeway in the way the accommodation requirement is met, but anything unusual or out of the norm should be discussed with the ADA coordinator. Always contact the ADA coordinator when the student is uncomfortable or unhappy with accommodation. Complications related to ADA issues can result in legal actions against the college and/or individuals. The most common complaint received in the Office of Civil Rights is instructors not providing awarded accommodation to students at all or in full. It is crucial that we are diligent about providing the accommodation as written. Compromises are always possible, but need to be facilitated by the ADA coordinator. The ADA coordinator is there to ensure the process is compliant with the ADA law. Ignoring accommodation is never an option. Let's talk about the accommodation process and the best ways to administer the accommodation. The process to receive accommodation at Craven Community College is as follows. A student must complete the Student Request for Accommodation form. The accommodations form can be found in the Disability Services Office and on the Disability Services page on Craven's website. This is the first step. Once the form is completed, a discussion will be had with the student about the required medical documentation that must be provided in order for accommodation to be awarded. Once the medical documentation is received, a student interview is scheduled with the ADA coordinator and conducted. Accommodation is then approved, and an accommodation letter is completed and emailed to the student and instructors. It is then the student's responsibility to ensure that the instructor is aware of the accommodation and that they have received an accommodations letter regarding the accommodation. The faculty's role in the accommodation process is to contact the ADA coordinator immediately if they feel that changes should be made to the accommodation. It's impossible to know the setup and delivery of every classroom. The ADA coordinator relies on feedback from instructors. It is important that faculty make students aware of ADA services and refer students to the ADA coordinator when needed. As an institution and individuals, we can be held liable for not telling a student about disability services when it is warranted. Oftentimes, instructors will see common accommodations repeated among different students. Testing accommodations are among the most common. Although testing accommodation is regularly sought, the details of that accommodation can vary. If an instructor feels that an extended time will compromise the test in some way, they need to discuss the concerns with the coordinator. Accommodations for extended time are often accompanied by testing and a distraction-reduced room. Accommodation given at the college level is different from accommodation given in K through 12. IEPs and 504 plans are awarded in the K through 12 system and guarantee success. Accommodation awarded at the post-secondary level guarantee access, not success. Accommodation must always be reasonable. Most requests for accommodations are going to be reasonable, and the college is required to provide the accommodation unless it falls into one of the unreasonable categories. An accommodation will not be provided if there is a direct threat to the health and safety of others. Accommodation that will cause a substantial change in an essential element within a curriculum cannot be awarded. If an accommodation request were to create a substantial alteration or change in which services in a class are provided, the accommodation would not be approved. Lastly, if an accommodation were to place an undue financial or administrative burden on the college. These are a few simple do's and don'ts. When encountering anyone with accommodations, do talk to the student about the accommodation and work out any logistics in providing the accommodation. Always treat disabled students the same as non-disabled students. Be respectful and mindful about where you discussed ADA-related requirements with students, and remember to refer students to ADA services when needed. Please do not make assumptions about a student's ability. Documentation is confidential, and the ADA coordinator will not break confidentiality to discuss the nature of anyone's disability. Finally, what do we do with those animals that students bring to class? Only 2 animals are recognized as a service animal: dogs and a miniature horse. These animals are not required to wear a service animal vest, and there's no certification training officially recognized that will prove the dog or miniature horse are legitimate service animals when these animals are encountered on campus. You can ask 2 questions only. Is that a service animal? What task does it perform? How a student answers those questions will determine the course of actions that need to be taken. If you encounter this situation on campus, ask the student, is this a service animal? If the answer is no, then the dog cannot be on campus. If the answer is yes, then the next question to ask is, what task does the dog perform? If the student's answer is something like, it helps me with mobility issues or warns me on the onset of a seizure, then the student does not need an accommodation form from the ADA coordinator. If the answer to that question is, the animal is an emotional support animal or it keeps me calm, then the student is required to go through the accommodation process with the ADA coordinator and obtain an accommodation form. Individuals should always clean up after their service animal and keep the animal under control at all times. Students also need to ensure that there is no disruption in the classroom due to the presence of the animal. Please remember, if in doubt, pick up the phone or email the ADA coordinator. As part of our commitment to inclusion and equity, we want to introduce you to an essential initiative that supports all members of our community, the ADA Digital Accessibility Plan. This plan exists to ensure that all digital content, whether it's on our website, in Moodle, on internal platforms, or shared in the classroom, is fully accessible to everyone, including individuals with disabilities. At its core, the plan is about removing barriers and ensuring equal access to information and learning opportunities, regardless of a person's abilities or the technology they use. Craven launched this initiative in 2017, and it's built around 5 key focus areas. First is raising awareness. We want everyone, faculty, staff, and administrators, to understand why accessibility matters and how it impacts student success. All new hires, like you, complete an introductory session during onboarding, and ongoing training is available through our Center for Teaching and Learning. Next is making sure that documents, like Word files and PDFs, are accessible. This means formatting content properly, adding headings, alt text, and using readable fonts so screen readers and other assistive tools can work effectively. Whether you're posting a syllabus or a meeting agenda, your documents need to be accessible. The third area covers digital presentations. Any PowerPoint or slide deck used in class, at meetings, or shared online must meet accessibility standards. We provide training on how to create and update your presentations to meet these guidelines, and virtual options are always available if you can't attend in person. Multimedia is another major focus. Videos and audio files must include captions and be delivered using accessible media players. Whether the content is in a course, on our website, or on SharePoint, it should be usable by all. If you create or use media, you're responsible for ensuring it's accessible. Finally, we look at third-party tools. Sometimes we rely on platforms or content outside of our direct control. If those tools aren't accessible, we expect you to provide an alternative that is, something that communicates the same information in a way everyone can access and understand. The CTL is available to assist with creating alternate assignments. The ADA Digital Accessibility Plan is a living document. We review and revise it annually to stay aligned with the latest best practices and compliance standards, especially WCAG 2.1, Level AA. At Craven, accessibility is everyone's responsibility. By following this plan, you help create a more inclusive, equitable learning environment, and we thank you for being a part of it. If you ever need support, the Center for Teaching and Learning is ready to help guide you every step of the way.